pregnant wife tricked the mistress into confessing, while the millionaire watched from behind the mirror. Picture a grand estate perched on a windswept cliff, its sweeping marble halls cloaking hidden lies. Inside those gilded walls, one fateful night, a pregnant wife, her heart heavy with betrayal, set a daring trap for the very woman who threatened to unravel her marriage. Across a hidden passage, behind a mirrored wall, the brooding millionaire husband listened in secret, torn between fury, guilt, and heartbreak. This is the story of love twisted by deception, of heartbreak tangled in cunning schemes, and the shocking confession that would change every life caught in its snare. Brace yourself. Secrets are about to be laid bare. Maria Caldwell wasn't born into wealth. Far from it. Growing up in a cramped two-room apartment in a suburb of Kansas City, she remembered the tight squeezes of daily life. The squeak of rusted pipes, the nighttime lullaby of sirens, the single flickering streetlight that illuminated her bedroom window, these sounds accompanied her dreams of one day escaping into a brighter world. She had ambition and resilience. By the time she turned 18, she was at the top of her class, juggling multiple jobs to pay for her college education. Then she met John Caldwell, a real estate mogul nearly 15 years her senior. While her friends partied at clubs, Maria spent weekends studying in the college library. That was where she first spotted John. Strikingly handsome, with sharp features and an immaculate sense of style, he was reviewing investment portfolios in an adjacent study booth. When they bumped into each other by the coffee machine, Maria apologized profusely for spilling a bit of her cappuccino on his tailored suit. John brushed it off with a kind smile, and the twinkle in his eye revealed a spark that would ignite something far bigger than either could imagine. Within a year, Maria went from a bright-eyed college student scraping by to a newlywed living in a literal mansion. The Caldwell estate sat on the outskirts of Malibu, a place of breathtaking ocean views and endless sunshine. It was rumored that the initial building budget had been in the tens of millions, and that John had spared no expense on lavish furnishings. Each piece of art or furniture seemed curated to exude elegance and wealth. Visitors entering the driveway first passed through wrought iron gates featuring the Caldwell family crest, then wound past precisely trimmed rose hedges and a marble fountain depicting an ancient Grecian muse. Wherever Maria looked, there were polished floors that gleamed like mirrors, antique vases from dynasties long past, and radiant chandeliers that refracted light into rainbow shards. She often found it surreal, almost like stepping inside the set of an elaborate period film. Despite having so many material comforts, Maria quickly realized that wealth came with its own unique set of woes. John was a workaholic. He left before sunrise and returned long after sunset, on most days, flitting between board meetings and business trips. At first, Maria convinced herself that this was merely a phase. After all, they were newlyweds, and establishing a secure future was crucial. She filled her time with philanthropic pursuits, launching a charity for underprivileged youth, volunteering at local soup kitchens, and even hosting lavish fundraisers at the estate. Their love was real, at least. Maria believed it with every fiber of her being. John never seemed to show a glimmer of disinterest in her, even after the shine of the honeymoon phase had faded. He'd bring her thoughtful gifts, such as a rare novel she once mentioned offhand, or call her spontaneously just to tell her he missed her. So when she discovered that she was pregnant, she believed it would be the perfect fresh start for both of them, perhaps even a reason for John to slow down, maybe take fewer deals and more nights at home. Yet, the day Maria found out the news, a small, unsettled feeling gnawed at her. She tried to cast it aside, telling herself it was just nerves. But something in the way John reacted surprised, yes, but also unreadable, lingered in her mind. He embraced her, whispered how much he loved her, but his gaze drifted too soon, as though pulled away by a silent undertow. That night, as Maria lay in bed, she felt more anxious than excited. She told herself that tomorrow was a new day. Everything would be fine. It wasn't. Over the following weeks, John became even more distant. There were phone calls he wouldn't answer in front of her, urgent text messages he brushed off as work emergencies, and a tension in his posture she couldn't quite decode. Each passing day sharpened her intuition that something sinister had wormed its way into their marriage. And though Maria's heart pounded at the thought of it, she decided that if she was going to bring a child into this world, she had to uncover the truth, even if it meant shattering every mirage she had built around her gilded life. It began with small details, late nights at the office that made little sense given John's schedule, whispers about him meeting mysterious clients privately, even though his CFO, Caroline Parker, insisted that most deals were being handled over official business lunches. Then there was the day Maria discovered a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume on John's favorite jacket. It was crisp and floral, so unlike her own sweet vanilla fragrance. She tried to ignore it, brushing it off as a passing encounter or a colleague's perfume clinging to the fabric during a hug. But the doubts wouldn't let go. Maria's friend, Emily Thompson, was the first to articulate what Maria feared. Over a quiet lunch, Emily casually mentioned rumors swirling through their social circles. People talk, Maria. They say John's been seen with a woman, someone young, gorgeous, and apparently quite taken with him. At first, Maria's face flushed with embarrassment. She refused to believe idle gossip. After all, John was a recognizable figure. Paparazzi and rumor mongers constantly spread false stories about him. She politely changed the subject, trying not to show the surge of alarm that pounded in her chest. Yet, as the days marched on, pieces of evidence began to gather like storm clouds on the horizon. Once, when John's phone buzzed on the bedside table at 4 a.m, Maria jolted awake. She saw him fumble for the phone, glimpsed the worry on his face, and heard him mumble incoherent excuses as he stepped into the hallway. The next morning, his phone was nowhere to be seen, locked away perhaps in his study or some other place he thought was safer. The secrecy felt suffocating. Maria told herself that maybe he was just stressed about a new deal. Maybe he was protecting her from the ugliness of ruthless business sharks. She tried to be supportive, cooking him gourmet meals and leaving handwritten notes of encouragement in his briefcase. But all those loving gestures went unanswered. John gave her brief smiles and fleeting kisses, but his presence was like a ghost's there, yet not truly present. Desperation drove Maria to an unthinkable measure. She hired a private investigator. Her search led her to a discreet man named Andrew Maxwell, who had a sterling reputation for unearthing truths people tried desperately to hide. She met him in a nondescript coffee shop miles from home, wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, in hopes no one would recognize her. It felt surreal, like stepping into a crime novel. Andrew listened quietly, jotting down details as Maria explained her suspicions. When she confessed she was pregnant and frightened that John might be hiding a mistress, Andrew gave a sympathetic nod. "I'll do everything in my power to find the truth," he assured her, "but you need to prepare yourself. The truth isn't always kind." Those words stayed with her. Over the next couple of weeks, Andrew's updates arrived via short, cryptic text messages. "He's meeting someone tomorrow night," read one. Then, confirmed location. Following, read another. Each message chipped away at Maria's hope, leaving behind raw dread. Finally, Andrew sent a long text, "We have evidence. Need to meet in person." Heart pounding, Maria agreed to meet him at a seedy cafe near the outskirts of town. Andrew slid a folder across the table. Inside it were photographs grainy, yet unmistakable. There was John, smiling in a way she hadn't seen in months, with his arm around a stunning woman, dark-haired and elegant in a way that exuded confidence. They looked at each other with an intensity that needed no caption. Maria felt a wave of nausea, her vision blurred with tears, but she fought to maintain composure. Andrew gently pushed a few more papers toward her receipts, emails, and phone records. It was all there, laid out in black and white. Her name is Danielle Reyes, Andrew said quietly. They've been seeing each other for a few months. From what I've gathered, she works in marketing at one of your husband's subsidiary companies. The world seemed to close in on Maria. The pictures, the receipts, the knowledge that another woman was stealing the life she had tried so hard to cultivate it stabbed at her like shards of glass. She pressed a hand to her stomach, remembering the child she carried. The confusion turned into anger, then a terrifying resolve. She was not going to sit quietly while her unborn child's future was jeopardized by a betrayal so brazen. "Can we set a trap?" she asked, her voice trembling yet iron-tinged with determination. "I need more than just these photographs. I need a confession, something that will make John see who she really is, or at least ensure that my child's future is protected. Please help me, Andrew." He hesitated, sipping his coffee slowly as if weighing the risks. "I can help, but we have to be cautious. The plan needs to be carefully staged." He lowered his voice. "I know someone who can arrange a meeting where you can confront Danielle without revealing who you are. But we have to do this right." Maria took a deep, shaky breath, swearing silently that, if John was lost to her, she would still fight for the life and security of her child. "I'm ready," she said, "whatever it takes." News of John's rumored affair was like a crack in the facade of the grand Caldwell estate, one that threatened to expand and split everything down the middle. While Maria wrestled with heartbreak, she found unlikely allies among the estate's staff. Over time, Maria had treated them more like an extended family, never forgetting birthdays, always inquiring after their children, and ensuring fair wages and benefits. They adored her and noticed her sudden turmoil. Quietly, they offered what help they could. Sasha, the head housekeeper, slipped Maria a small key. "I've seen him sneaking around the East Wing with that woman," Sasha admitted, eyes downcast as if ashamed of her employer's conduct. "He usually picks the nights you're at charity events or visiting your mother. I can't bear to watch you in pain, Mrs. Caldwell." This key opens a storage closet next to the reading room they sometimes use. Maria's stomach clenched at the revelation. She hadn't realized the betrayal was happening under their roof. The sense of violation of her home, her sanctuary, rekindled the fury within her. She thanked Sasha and told her that, no matter what happened next, Sasha was not to blame. If anything, Maria was grateful for the loyalty the staff showed her. Meanwhile, Andrew Maxwell began coordinating with a friend named Victoria Laird, a woman known for her expertise in discreet setups. Victoria worked as a risk analyst for high-profile clients, but she had a side gig setting up accidental encounters to expose corporate espionage and marital affairs. She had access to hidden camera technology, audio bugs, and even double-mirrored rooms at an exclusive club. The plan quickly took shape. They decided on a cunning approach: invite Danielle Reyes to what she believed would be a private job interview with one of John Caldwell's wealthy acquaintances. Victoria would pose as the interviewer, luring Danielle with the promise of an extremely lucrative marketing position. The interview would take place in a special suite at an upscale hotel known for its hush-hush dealings with CIP clients. In that suite, behind a mirrored wall, Maria and possibly John would watch and listen. Maria, trembling with both anticipation and dread, had to navigate how to involve John. Part of her wanted to leap straight into confrontation, demanding explanations and apologies. Another part of her recognized the cunning potential in letting John witness Danielle's true colors, especially if Danielle believed she was alone. So she put forth a plan to John that night, as he lay in bed, half distracted by yet another business email. I have a friend who needs help, Maria began cautiously. A small marketing startup that's looking to break into international markets. They asked if I knew anyone who could help them identify top-tier marketing talent. I told them about your network and how you've got an eye for bright professionals. John glanced up. I'm not sure I have the time right now, Maria. Things are tense with the real estate market. But who is this friend? It's actually Andrew Maxwell. Maria lied smoothly, her heart pounding. He does a lot of charity consulting. He's working with a new philanthropic marketing firm. They need someone with experience who can spearhead global campaigns. Maria took a calculated pause. They're interviewing a candidate this Friday evening at the Crystal Gate Hotel. They'd like me to observe. Maybe get your input too. You can remain off to the side if you prefer, behind the two-way mirror they have in those VIP suites. She shrugged nonchalantly. It's a typical setup for big money interviews where they want to see how the candidate performs under pressure, apparently. John pursed his lips. You want me to come watch an interview behind a mirror? Maria forced a light laugh. I know, it sounds ridiculous, but Andrew insists that's how this firm operates for high-level positions. They want to see if the candidate is genuine, no pretenses. And you know a thing or two about genuine talent. Your insight would be valuable. She saw the gears turning in John's head. She knew him well enough to predict he'd think about how this might benefit him networking, forging alliances, maybe even gleaning insights for his own ventures. After a moment, he nodded. All right, I'll be there. But I can't promise I'll stay the entire time. That small victory sent Maria's heart fluttering. She had successfully planted the seeds. Now, if only Danielle took the bait. According to Andrew, Danielle was eager for any chance to climb the corporate ladder, a trait that John found impressive, but which Maria saw as opportunistic. With the promise of a dream job beckoning, Danielle would show up, ready to brag about her achievements and her connections. It was exactly the scenario they needed to draw out a confession or, at the very least, reveal her manipulative nature in front of John. For the next few days, Maria walked the corridors of the Caldwell estate in a haze. She tried to keep up appearances, greeting guests warmly, pretending the fear and rage inside her wasn't unraveling her composure. She touched her belly often, reminding herself that she was fighting not merely for her own dignity, but for her child's future. If John had any inkling about her machinations, he didn't show it. He was preoccupied with work calls, lunch meetings, and texts he guarded more closely than ever. Late at night, Maria would sit on the edge of the bed, her laptop open to a blank document. She considered writing a letter to her unborn child, explaining why she was going to such extremes. But the words never came. Her thoughts were a whirl of betrayal, sorrow, and vengeance. In a moment of clarity, she turned off the laptop, placed her hand gently over her abdomen, and whispered, I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise. Friday arrived with a tension as heavy as storm clouds ready to break. The Crystal Gate Hotel was a luxurious high-rise known for its panoramic views of the city skyline and its impeccably discreet staff. Politicians, celebrities, and the ultra-wealthy often used the exclusive suite on the 25th floor, equipped with sophisticated two-way mirror technology. For everything from high-stakes negotiations to private interviews they didn't want publicized. Maria arrived early, meeting Andrew Maxwell and Victoria Laird in the lobby. The air was scented with fresh lilies, and the marble floors gleamed under soft golden lighting. Despite the polished grandeur, Maria felt a knot tighten in her stomach, anxiety mixing with a grim determination. Victoria, a composed woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper sense of strategy, looked impeccable in a charcoal grey pantsuit. Danielle should be here in an hour, she said quietly, glancing at her watch. She believes she's scheduled to meet a representative from the philanthropic marketing firm, so I'll handle the questioning. We've wired the interview room with hidden microphones, and Andrew will be in the adjoining observation area, controlling the audio feed. Maria nodded, glancing toward the bank of elevators. "And John?" she asked softly. Andrew pointed to his phone. "He just texted. He'll be here shortly. Says he's running late from a meeting." "That's typical," Maria murmured, biting back a rush of bitterness. Part of her wondered if John was truly late because of business or because he was with Danielle, coaching her on how to handle a supposed job interview. Yet she kept those suspicions buried. She needed to remain composed for what was about to unfold. They headed to the suite, a sprawling set of rooms that opened onto a large lounge area, complete with plush leather sofas, a crystal chandelier, and a floor-to-ceiling window offering a dazzling view of the city. Beyond that was the interview room, a smaller, more minimalist space with a glass-topped table and modern chairs. On one wall was an imposing mirror that seemed ordinary enough, but Maria knew better. Behind that mirror lay a dark, hidden corridor with a small control room where John and Maria could watch unseen. "Test the equipment," Victoria instructed Andrew. He flicked a switch on a console and a soft red light glowed. With a nod, Victoria walked into the interview room and spoke. Her voice carried clearly through the speakers in the hidden corridor, just as planned. "All systems are go," Andrew confirmed. "Once Danielle arrives, you and John can slip behind the mirror, out of sight." Maria's pulse pounded in her ears. She stepped into the hidden corridor, feeling claustrophobic in the narrow space. Overhead, recessed LED lights cast a faint glow. The two-way mirror allowed her a full view of the interview room. She could already picture Danielle sitting there, perhaps wearing some glamorous ensemble to impress the interviewer, flipping her hair and boasting about her connections. Maria inhaled shakily. This was the moment she'd planned, for the moment that might tear her life apart or, in some twisted sense, piece it back together. About 20 minutes later, John arrived. He slipped into the corridor silently, his expression unreadable. He glanced at Maria, and for a fleeting second their eyes met. In that brief exchange, she saw a swirl of emotions on his face: impatience, confusion, perhaps even guilt. Wordlessly, he leaned against the wall. "I still don't quite understand why I'm here," he muttered, breaking the silence. "But let's get this over with." Maria found her voice shaky. "Just watch. Listen to how she answers the questions. The firm wants insights on how top marketing candidates handle themselves." John shrugged but didn't argue further. He crossed his arms and turned his attention to the empty interview room. Maria couldn't tell if he suspected anything. Part of her was relieved he hadn't asked too many questions. Another part felt a pang of pain. Why wasn't he more curious about why Maria insisted on this unusual arrangement? A few minutes later, Danielle Reyes walked in. Maria's heart jolted at the sight of her. Danielle was strikingly attractive, with raven black hair falling in glossy waves around her shoulders. She wore a fitted blazer and a pencil skirt, exuding both confidence and allure. Her eyes flicked around the room as if searching for something or someone. Victoria greeted her with a courteous smile, introducing herself as the lead recruiter. Danielle returned the greeting, her voice soft yet charged with a hint of self-assuredness that Maria recognized from the photographs Andrew had shown her. It was as if Danielle knew she was formidable, a woman accustomed to turning heads and getting what she wanted. Behind the mirror, Maria felt her stomach churn. John's body tensed beside her. Whether he was anxious or intrigued, she couldn't tell, but she sensed his breathing change shallower, quicker. Victoria opened a folder and began the interview. "So, Miss Reyes, tell me about your background in marketing and your recent achievements." Danielle leaned forward, her posture poised. "I've led several successful campaigns," she said, smiling. In my current position at Caldwell Enterprises, I've been tasked with high-profile accounts and consistently delivered results that surpassed expectations. The mention of Caldwell Enterprises was like a knife twisting in Maria's heart. She glanced at John, whose expression remained unreadable. Danielle continued talking, praising her own adaptability and hinting at friendly relationships with top executives. The undertone of her bragging left no doubt that she was referencing John in some coded manner. Victoria gave a polite nod, then began guiding the conversation toward the personal motivations and ambitions that Danielle might have. Maria knew that's where the real trick lay. If Danielle was as ambitious and manipulative as they suspected, she might reveal more than she intended. All Maria needed was a sliver of confession, something that would make John confront the undeniable reality of betrayal. Victoria glanced down at her folder, feigning a mild curiosity. "So, Miss Reyes, we're interested in how candidates handle ethical questions, especially when they work so closely with high-profile clients. Can you describe a situation where personal relationships might have influenced a professional outcome?" Danielle shifted slightly, her gaze dropping for a moment before she offered a practiced smile. "Well, in the business world, relationships are everything. Sometimes those relationships can lead to opportunities that benefit the company." She paused, tapping her manicured nails lightly on the table. "Or, at times, they can blur professional boundaries. But if managed correctly, everyone involved can prosper." Behind the mirror, Maria's anger flared. There it was, that carefully coded language that alluded to clandestine affairs and unethical networking. She glanced at John. His jaw tightened, but he made no move to interrupt. His eyes remained fixed on Danielle as though he was searching her face for clues, perhaps recalling his own moments with her. Maria resisted the urge to scream, to confront him. Instead, she stayed silent, letting the plan unfold. Victoria nodded, leaning in as if intrigued. "Indeed, boundaries can blur. But tell me, Miss Reyes, how do you handle the emotional complexities that might arise from such entanglements?" For the first time, Danielle looked caught off guard. She swallowed, glancing at her folded hands before meeting Victoria's gaze again. "It depends on the situation. In some cases, it's best to keep emotions out of the picture and focus on what's beneficial for both parties. For instance," she hesitated, choosing her words with caution, "if a client is in a high-stress environment or a complicated personal situation, offering them comfort or understanding can forge a deeper trust, which in turn strengthens the professional bond." Maria's heart thundered. The insinuation was crystal clear to her ears. Danielle was describing her approach to seducing John and weaving herself into his confidence. Victoria pounced gently. "So you're not against using personal connections to secure a deal or position for yourself if you believe it helps the overall business?" Danielle's eyes flitted briefly with a self-satisfied gleam. "I've always believed in capitalizing on opportunities as they come. In my current role, I've been fortunate to have a close rapport with key decision-makers, and that's opened doors I might otherwise never have discovered." Behind the mirror, Maria felt the tension radiating off John. She dared to look up at him. The lines on his forehead deepened, and his mouth set in a grim line. Yet he remained silent. Maria wanted to grab his hand and force him to confess, right then and there. But she didn't move. Victoria pressed further. "You mentioned close rapport. Could you elaborate on how that's helped you in your career?" Danielle's lips twitched in a slight smile, as if relishing a secret. "I've had the privilege of working with influential individuals who recognized my talents. They taught me how to navigate corporate hierarchies. Let's just say I've made connections that will serve me well for years to come." A hush hung in the air. The words themselves weren't enough to constitute a direct confession. But the tone, the innuendo any outsider could sense, there was more behind Danielle's smooth answers. Victoria decided to shift gears. "One final question," she said, her voice calm yet commanding. "Our firm values stability and integrity. Hypothetically, if you found yourself in a situation where a senior executive was involved in a personal relationship that jeopardized his marriage or public image, how would you handle that? Especially if you were personally benefiting from the liaison." Danielle's face paled momentarily, her eyes darting. She forced a laugh, trying to brush off the implication. "Well, that's quite hypothetical, but I believe in loyalty. If someone has mentored me, supported me, offered me a stepping stone in my career, I feel a sense of obligation to protect their interests. If you're asking whether I'd expose them or abandon them," she paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in. "I wouldn't. I'd stand by them. If that means keeping certain details private, so be it." Behind the mirror, Maria clenched her fists. This woman had no shame, openly admitting she would continue an affair for personal gain. The cruelty of it all seared Maria's chest. Then, something unexpected happened. Danielle's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down at it, and her eyes widened with mild panic. "I apologize," she said to Victoria, though she made no attempt to hide her screen. For a split second, Maria and John both saw the caller ID illuminated on the phone. John Caldwell. The moment was fleeting, but the message was loud and clear. A flicker of shock crossed Danielle's face, and she quickly declined the call. She smiled stiffly at Victoria. "Sorry about that. The office is probably wondering where I am." In the hidden corridor, John inhaled sharply. Whether out of anger, fear, or guilt, Maria couldn't tell, but the silence between them was deafening. The air felt thick enough to slice. Victoria, ever the professional, merely raised an eyebrow and pretended to make a note. "No worries, Miss Reyes. We're nearly finished. But tell me, if a conflict of interest arose, would you have any reservations about severing personal relationships to protect your career?" Danielle considered the question carefully. She toyed with the pen in front of her, her expression calculating. "I'm not heartless. However, one must be pragmatic. If a personal relationship becomes detrimental, if, for instance, it no longer serves a mutual benefit, I would consider ending it." She leaned in slightly, her eyes gleaming with ambition. Business is business after all. In that chilling statement, Maria recognized the scale of Danielle's ruthlessness. The woman was willing to discard anyone who ceased to be useful. That's what John was to her, a rung on the ladder to success. Maria fought the lump in her throat. Behind the mirror, she sensed John's composure cracking. His brow glistened with sweat, and his eyes never left Danielle's face. Victoria closed the folder. "Thank you for your honesty, Miss Reyes. We appreciate your time. Our firm will be in touch after we review the notes." Danielle rose, smoothing her skirt. "Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to hearing from you." She flashed a polished grin and gathered her purse. As she turned to leave, Victoria suggested, "Actually, there's another room where a final check needs to be done. Would you mind waiting a moment? My colleague will escort you." Confusion flickered across Danielle's features, but she nodded. Victoria pressed a button on a small remote, signaling Andrew to step into the interview room. He opened the door, greeting Danielle with a respectful nod and guiding her toward an adjacent lounge area under the pretense of finishing paperwork. When the door closed, leaving the interview room empty, Maria and John stood in silence behind the mirror. It felt as if the walls were closing in on them. Finally, Maria gathered her courage and turned to face her husband, whose face was awash in shame and fury. The showdown was about to begin. Maria's heart raced like a war drum. She stood mere feet from John, the mirror no longer reflecting just a simple interview. It reflected the twisted reality of their marriage. She saw the anger in his eyes, mirrored in her own. "John," she began softly, her voice wavering. She didn't know where to start, whether to demand an explanation or to unleash her pent-up fury. Her mind flashed back to every suspicious text message, every late-night phone call, every flimsy excuse. All those months of heartbreak and confusion swelled in her throat. John ran a hand through his hair, struggling to compose himself. "Maria, you have to understand." He halted, words tangled in his mouth. Guilt weighed his shoulders down. His facade of confidence cracked under the glaring truth that Danielle was more than just a rumor. She was a relentless force who would use anyone to get ahead. "I heard every word," Maria pressed, her voice trembling with rage. "Every word. You were calling her during the interview, weren't you? Why, John? Why keep up this charade?" He exhaled, frustration and regret warring on his face. "I was trying to warn her, tell her not to say anything incriminating." "I had no idea you were. You had no idea I'd set this up?" Maria's anger erupted. She remembered her unborn child, the vow she made to fight for their future. "You've been lying to me for months, letting that woman roam around our home, around our marriage." John's eyes locked onto hers. "I never meant for it to go this far. I never expected Danielle was just—" He paused, searching for the right words. "It was a mistake. It started as a distraction. I felt like I was losing control over everything, my business, my marriage, my life." And Danielle was supportive in her own twisted way. Maria let out a bitter laugh. "Supportive? She's using you. You just heard her talk about dropping relationships that no longer serve her. She doesn't care about you, John. She cares about what you can give her." He rubbed his temples, refusing to meet her stare. "I know that now, seeing it so clearly. Hearing her talk about me like a stepping stone, I feel sick." Silence hung heavy between them for a moment. Maria could practically hear her own pulse in her ears. She swallowed, her mouth dry. "Did you ever think about how this would affect me, affect our child?" At that, John's face registered a deep sorrow. "The baby. I didn't know how to handle it. The idea of becoming a father terrified me. I felt trapped, pressured to be the perfect husband, the perfect provider. I let my fears push me into doing the worst possible thing." The mention of their child twisted Maria's anger into a storm of heartbreak. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "So, you threw yourself into the arms of another woman because you were scared? Do you realize how selfish that is?" John shook his head, pain creasing his features. "I'm not proud of myself. And I didn't plan on continuing it. I swear I was going to end it. But Danielle, she threatened to cause problems at the office, to go public about our affair if I didn't protect her position. I felt trapped." Maria clenched her fists. "So you chose to protect her over your pregnant wife?" "No," he burst out, his voice echoing off the mirror. "I was just paralyzed. I was trying to find a way out without destroying everything. But I see now, everything is already ruined." A volatile hush filled the narrow corridor. In the adjacent lounge area, Andrew and Victoria were undoubtedly making sure Danielle didn't leave. There was still the final piece of the plan, a direct confrontation that would force Danielle to confess in front of Maria. Perhaps that would be enough to break the illusions for John once and for all. "Maria, I'm sorry," John whispered, stepping closer. "I love you. This was a stupid, unforgivable mistake. But it doesn't change that I want to be with you, that I want to be a father to our child." For a moment, Maria wavered, recalling the early days of their relationship, how genuine and tender John had been. But the memory of Danielle's smirk and the perfume on John's jacket overshadowed those fond recollections. "Love doesn't excuse betrayal," she whispered. John swallowed hard. "What do you want me to do?" She inhaled shakily. "I want a full confession from Danielle. The first want her to admit that she's been using you, manipulating you. And I want you to see it for yourself, without any more lies. I want to hear you say in front of her that we're done. You choose our family, not her. Then maybe I can begin to believe you." His eyes flickered with something akin to determination. He nodded. Let's do it. Let's get this over with. Maria turned away, leading him out of the corridor and toward the lounge area where Andrew was stalling Danielle. Every step felt like walking through thickening fog, the corridor seeming endless. Every second, a countdown to the final confrontation that would decide the fate of their marriage. The private lounge adjacent to the interview room was decorated in muted tones cream couches, a glass coffee table, and abstract paintings on the walls. Danielle sat perched on the edge of a chair, her elegant posture slightly stiff. At her side was a leather folder containing her resume and references, now rendered meaningless by the exposure that loomed. Andrew stood near a small bar area, pretending to organize some papers, while Victoria lingered by the door, projecting a calm authority. The moment Maria and John walked in, Danielle's face froze with surprise. It took her a second to register the significance of their joint appearance. "John, Maria," she stammered, a flicker of confusion crossing her features before morphing into a mask of cold composure. She quickly tried to stand, adopting a gracious smile. I didn't expect to see you two here." Maria stepped forward, standing tall despite the turmoil raging inside her. "We've been here the whole time, Danielle. Behind the mirror, listening to every word you said during that so-called interview." Danielle's eyes darted to John for some sign of support. He refused to meet her gaze. His silence spoke volumes. "I don't understand," Danielle insisted, forcing a tremor of hurt into her voice. "Why would you?" Maria's voice trembled with controlled fury. "I wanted you to confess, Danielle. I wanted you to admit the truth about your relationship with my husband and your real intentions." A shadow crossed Danielle's face, but she clung to her confident demeanor. "I don't know what you mean." "John, tell her." John finally lifted his gaze, eyes filled with regret. "Don't lie, Danielle. You've manipulated me, threatened me, and used my money for your gain. Everything you said in that interview proved it." The veneer of sophistication slipped from Danielle's features. She dropped all pretense of polite innocence. "Oh, don't act so righteous," she spat, her voice laced with bitterness. "You're the one who started this, who pursued me, who wanted an escape from your precious wife." Maria felt a stab of pain at Danielle's words. She glanced at John, saw the flicker of shame on his face. "Enough," Maria said, her voice tight. "I'm pregnant with John's child, and I will not stand by while you continue to insinuate yourself into our lives." Danielle let out a dark laugh, the corners of her mouth twisting. "You really think you two can salvage this marriage after everything that's happened?" John told me everything, how he felt stifled, how he was afraid of fatherhood, how he needed someone who actually understood him. "He may have regrets now, but don't pretend you're some saint, John." John's jaw clenched, but he forced himself to respond calmly. "I made a mistake, a terrible one. But that doesn't change the fact that you've been using me for your own ambition. You said so yourself, more or less, when you told Victoria here that you'd sever any relationship that didn't serve you." Danielle sneered, crossing her arms. "Typical. You men think you can have an affair and just walk away unscathed. But let me make one thing clear. I won't be thrown aside like trash. If you try to cut me off, I'll make sure the board of Caldwell Enterprises knows everything. I'll feed this story to the press if I have to. You'll be fighting off lawsuits and scandal for years." A chill settled over the room. Maria glanced toward Andrew, who stepped closer, a subtle signal of support. She looked back at Danielle. "Your threats don't scare me anymore. We already have enough evidence to show that you pursued John for financial gain and threatened him if he didn't comply. If you go public, you'll face defamation lawsuits, blackmail charges, and complete ruin in the corporate world. Is that really what you want?" For the first time, Danielle looked uncertain. She glanced between Maria, John, and the stoic faces of Andrew and Victoria. A hush blanketed the lounge, broken only by the faint hum of the hotel's air conditioning. Maria sensed that the time for final words had arrived. She summoned a calm she never knew she possessed. "Confess," she demanded. "Confess that you've been having an affair with my husband, that you used him for financial and professional benefits, and that you threatened him to maintain your position. Confess it now, or we'll take this directly to the authorities." Danielle's lips curled in a mix of anger and fear. Finally, her shoulders slumped, and she expelled a shaky breath. "Fine," she hissed. "I had an affair with John. He gave me money, introduced me to people I needed to know. And when he tried to end it, I told him I'd go public. Are you happy now?" Maria felt a strange sense of both vindication and sorrow. This confession was the truth she'd been seeking, but hearing it aloud made her chest ache. The betrayal was irrevocably real, no longer hidden behind closed doors. She looked at John, who appeared crushed by the weight of his shame. Andrew stepped forward. "I've recorded the confession. That'll be enough to protect you and your wife from any legal backlash, John. It also means Miss Reyes should think twice before trying to use this affair to blackmail you further." Danielle turned on her heel, snatching her purse from a nearby chair. "Go to hell, all of you," she snarled. Then she stormed out of the lounge, slamming the door behind her. The echo reverberated through the silent room, a resounding punctuation mark on the entire catastrophe. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Maria, her eyes damp, pressed a trembling hand to her abdomen. She whispered, "I just want to go home." She glanced at John, unsure of what future lay ahead, but certain that they couldn't begin to heal until they left the suffocating confines of this staged confrontation. John nodded, his voice thick with regret. "Let's go." They exited the suite, Andrew and Victoria following silently behind them, ensuring that Danielle had indeed left the premises. Maria walked down the corridor feeling both a dizzying relief and a profound sadness. The truth had been laid bare, but now the real question remained: could their marriage survive it? The days following the confrontation were an emotional storm for Maria. She spent hours locked in her room at the Caldwell estate, torn between anger toward John and worry for her unborn child. The adrenaline rush from exposing Danielle and forcing her confession had passed, replaced by a heavy emptiness. John, for his part, tried to make amends. He cancelled nearly all his business engagements, refusing to travel or hold late-night meetings. Each morning, he made a point of being home for breakfast, offering to drive Maria to her prenatal appointments. He'd bring her tea, flowers, and small tokens of affection, as if each gesture could erase months of betrayal. But Maria's heart was bruised. She let him help in practical ways, carrying groceries, rearranging the furniture in the nursery, but emotionally, she held him at arm's length. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she admitted one night, tears swimming in her eyes. "You lied to me. You made me feel inadequate, like I was the reason you needed someone else." John's face filled with remorse. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to keep trying, one day at a time. I love you, Maria, and I love our baby. I was a coward, but I'm done running away." The tension simmered. Each day, the household staff quietly tiptoed around them, sensing the fragile peace. At times, Maria overheard hushed whispers about Danielle's abrupt departure from Caldwell Enterprises. Rumor had it she tried to leverage her relationship with John for a severance package, but with the recorded confession in Andrew Maxwell's possession, she couldn't push too far. She left with minimal compensation and no references. The staff seemed sympathetic toward Maria, offering gentle smiles and comforting words whenever she passed by. As the pregnancy progressed, Maria grappled with her future. She considered leaving the estate, moving back to her old neighborhood to be near her mother. But the child in her womb deserved a stable home, and as much as she wanted to punish John, she also recognized the importance of having a father figure. The conflict tore at her day and night. In a small attempt to reclaim her life, Maria threw herself into her charity work again. She hosted a fundraiser for underprivileged mothers and children, ironically channeling her own emotions into helping others. The event was successful, raising record donations. John attended too, discreetly standing at her side yet giving her space, as though he understood that trust was a fragile bird that might fly away if forced. Late one evening, Maria found herself alone in the soon-to-be nursery. The walls were painted a soft pastel yellow, and a mobile of paper cranes hung from the ceiling. She ran her fingers over the edge of a small crib, tears gathering in her eyes. This was supposed to be the place. Her child would feel safe, a symbol of love and unity. Yet their family had already been stained by deceit. A gentle knock on the door startled her. She turned to see John hovering in the doorway, a hesitant expression on his face. "May I come in?" She nodded, and he stepped inside, taking in the sight of the nursery. "We have to make this right for our baby," he murmured, his gaze drifting to the mobile. "Whatever it takes, I'm willing to do it." Maria's throat tightened. She wanted to hurl accusations, to remind him of the pain he'd caused. But looking at the crib, she also felt the weight of the future pressing on her. "I need time," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I can't promise things will ever be the same." John swallowed hard, approaching slowly, his voice earnest. "I understand. I'm not asking for miracles. But I do want to be here for you, for our child. I'll go to counseling, give you every bank statement, let you track my phone, anything that helps regain your trust." She studied him for a long moment. In his eyes, she saw genuine remorse, the flicker of a man who knew he'd nearly lost everything. "Counseling," she said slowly, clinging to the word. "I think we need a professional's help if we're going to move forward. I don't want to raise our child in a home filled with resentment." John nodded. "Whatever it takes," he repeated, voice wavering. "I'll do it." They stood in silence for a moment, neither quite ready to embrace, but both acknowledging that the child they were about to bring into the world deserved better. It wasn't forgiveness, nor was it full reconciliation, but it was a first step, a small, unsteady step toward healing. Weeks turned into months, and Maria's belly grew rounder by the day. She and John began attending couples therapy sessions, something that felt both awkward and strangely liberating. Under the guidance of a compassionate therapist, they unraveled the layers of their relationship, the early days of passion, the unspoken fears that crept in, the destructive path that led John astray. Some sessions ended with tears, others with anger, but gradually, Maria discovered that confronting the pain helped lessen its grip on her heart. John, for his part, opened up about the root of his fears, an overbearing father who always demanded perfection, a terror of not living up to the expectations of fatherhood, and the insecurities masked by his outward display of wealth and power. Neither excused his actions, but understanding them brought Maria a semblance of empathy. At home, John made real changes. He reorganized his workload so he could be present at every prenatal appointment. He joined Maria in selecting baby names, painting the nursery, even reading parenting books, activities that had once seemed trivial to him. The Caldwell estate, once overshadowed by suspicion and betrayal, began to feel more like a home again. The staff breathed easier, and a quiet stability seeped into daily life. One afternoon, Maria found herself gazing at the ocean from the balcony. The gulls circled lazily, and the sun glittered on the waves. She sipped a cup of tea, thinking back to the day she learned of John's affair, the night she planned the trap, the moment Danielle confessed behind that mirrored wall. It felt like another lifetime. She still had scars, emotional wounds that would take time to fully mend, but she was no longer drowning in despair. John stepped onto the balcony, wrapping a cautious arm around her shoulders. She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. There was a tentative peace between them, woven from fragile threads of trust that were slowly growing stronger. "I talked to Andrew Maxwell today," John said, stroking her hair. He said Danielle left town, probably looking for new job prospects elsewhere. He believes she won't come after us legally or publicly. She knows we have enough to ruin her if she does. Maria nodded, exhaling a soft sigh of relief. "I'm glad that chapter is over," she said. "But it still hurts, John. I don't think I can ever forget what she did, what you did." He pressed his lips to the top of her head. "I know, but I'm committed to spending the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me, showing you that I've changed." They stood together, the breeze ruffling their clothes, letting the vastness of the ocean offer a sense of possibility. Healing wouldn't be simple, but in that moment, Maria felt a spark of hope. She pictured her child, yet to be born, and whispered a silent prayer. "May you never know this kind of hurt. May you find nothing but love and security under this roof." At nightfall, the couple shared a quiet dinner, a simple meal of pasta and a fresh salad. They talked about baby names again. John suggested Eliana for a girl, Gabriel for a boy. Maria smiled softly, considering how those names sounded spoken aloud. After dessert, they wandered into the living room, where Maria turned on gentle classical music. They didn't dance, but they stood together, swaying slightly, finding comfort in closeness. As the final weeks of Maria's pregnancy approached, she experienced a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Bringing new life into the world was daunting, but the therapy sessions had taught her that vulnerability could be a strength. Slowly, she allowed John back into her heart, acknowledging the sincerity of his remorse. They weren't the same couple as before, maybe they never would be, but they were learning to build something new from the shattered pieces. The day Maria went into labor was a humid, overcast morning. The skies threatened rain, thunder rumbling in the distance. John rushed her to the hospital, his face pale with a mix of excitement and fear. Hours later, after the sharp pains and breathless pushes, Maria held a tiny baby girl in her arms. Overwhelmed by emotion, tears streamed down her face as John hovered close, tears shining in his own eyes. They named her Eliana Grace Caldwell, a name that spoke of hope, brightness, and a second chance. In that hospital room, as thunder rolled outside, John held Maria's hand, pressing his forehead gently to hers. "I promise," he whispered, voice trembling with devotion, "I'll protect you both with everything I have. I'll spend every day trying to be the man you deserve." Maria kissed her baby's forehead, then looked at John with quiet acceptance. The affair, the betrayal, and the heartbreak were part of their history scars that would never completely vanish. But in Eliana's tiny features, in the miracle of new life, they found a reason to believe in forgiveness and renewal. The story of Maria and John Caldwell reminds us that even the most opulent lives can hide heartbreak. Sometimes the greatest betrayal sparks the strongest resolve to fight for the truth. From the hidden mirror, where the pregnant wife listened to her husband's mistress confess, to the shaky path of healing they chose together, this journey brims with lessons on courage, resilience, and the power of a second chance. If you found yourself hooked on every twist, if you felt Maria's pain, John's guilt, and the pulse-pounding drama of the final revelation, help us spread the word. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel so more people can discover the hidden truths behind gilded doors. Together, let's explore how even the deepest wounds can heal with determination, honesty, and a dash of hope. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.
What happens when a sacred promise to an unborn child is stolen? For Millionaire's wife. Eleanor Vance, the name chosen for her son, was everything a legacy, a tribute, a bond. But she didn't know her husband's mistress, Chloe, had a twisted plan. In an act of unimaginable cruelty, Chloe gave birth first and secretly registered her own baby under the very same name, attempting to replace Eleanor and her child in the family history. But Chloe underestimated the wrath of a mother. Eleanor wouldn't just get even. She would get a global audience exposing the betrayal live on national television in a confrontation nobody would ever forget. Eleanor Vance believed in the architecture of a perfect life because she had built one. Her world, viewed from the penthouse of their Columbus Circle apartment, was a panorama of glittering success. The lights of Manhattan sprawled below her like a carpet of scattered diamonds, a constant reminder of the heights she and her husband, Julian Croft, had reached. At 34, Eleanor was the epitome of curated elegance, poised, intelligent, and now 8 months pregnant, carrying the heir to the Croft fortune with a serene grace that belied the quiet anxieties nesting in her heart. Their story was the kind magazines paid to feature. Julian, a charismatic force of nature, had clawed his way up from a working-class background in Queens to become a titan of private equity. He was handsome, with a predator's smile and eyes that could disarm world leaders and intimidate rivals with a single glance. Eleanor, by contrast, was old money, raised between a sprawling estate in the Hamptons and a pre-war building on Park Avenue. She'd met Julian at a charity gala, her calm confidence a soothing balm to his restless ambition. They were a power couple, their marriage a merger of legacy and drive. Now their final acquisition was on the horizon, a son. They had already chosen his name, a decision Eleanor held sacred. He would be Thomas Maxwell Vance. Thomas for her late grandfather, a philanthropist and patriarch who had taught her the meaning of quiet strength. Maxwell for Julian's own father, a man who had worked himself into an early grave laying bricks so his son could one day build empires. The name was a bridge between their worlds, a symbol of the dynasty they were creating. Eleanor would often wander into the nursery, a masterpiece of soft blues and cream, and whisper the name into the still air. "Thomas Maxwell," she would say, her hand resting on the swell of her belly. "We're all waiting for you." But lately the architecture of her perfect life had begun to show hairline cracks. It started subtly. Julian, once a man who craved home, began staying out later. The excuses were always plausible, delivered with that charming, weary smile of his. "The Singapore deal is a monster, Elle. We're in the final stretch." Or, "Had to take the board out for dinner. You know how it is." He would return late, smelling of expensive whiskey and a faint, unidentifiable perfume that wasn't hers. He'd kiss her forehead, his lips cool and distracted, his eyes already on the stock ticker glowing on his phone. The emotional distance grew wider than their king-sized bed. He stopped asking about the baby's kicks, his attention drifting when she spoke of her doctor's appointments. He'd buy her extravagant just because gifts, a Cartier bracelet, a vintage Chanel bag that felt less like tokens of affection and more like payments for his absence. They were beautiful, expensive apologies for sins he hadn't yet confessed. One evening, as Eleanor arranged a bouquet of white peonies in the foyer, she overheard him on the phone in his study, his voice low and urgent. "No, you can't call me here," he hissed. "I told you that. Just be patient. I'll handle everything." He emerged a moment later, his face a mask of practiced calm. "Everything all right, darling?" she asked, her voice steady. "Just a junior associate getting ahead of herself," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "Ambitious, but needs to learn the chain of command." He walked over and kissed her, but the gesture felt hollow, a performance for an audience of one. The junior associate had a name, Chloe Sterling. Eleanor didn't know it yet, but she would soon. Chloe was 26, with hungry eyes and the kind of fierce ambition that Julian once saw in his own reflection. She worked in the mergers and acquisitions department at Croft Capital, a place where only the sharpest survived. And Chloe was sharper than a shard of glass. She saw Julian not just as her boss, but as a prize to be won, a life to be claimed. She studied Eleanor from afar, poring over society columns and Instagram posts, learning her tastes, her habits, her world. She was a predator, learning her praise patterns, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment had already passed. The affair had been going on for 6 months. It had started with late nights at the office, a shared bottle of scotch, and Julian's intoxicating complaints about the pressures of his life pressures. Chloe was all too eager to soothe. To Julian it was a dalliance, a temporary escape from the impending weight of fatherhood and the quiet perfection of a life he sometimes felt he didn't deserve. To Chloe it was an audition, and as Eleanor stood in her perfect home, arranging perfect flowers for her perfect life, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. The cracks were spreading, and she was terrified that if she pressed too hard, the entire facade would shatter. The name Thomas Maxwell echoed in her mind, no longer a promise, but a prayer. The next few weeks were a masterclass in gaslighting. Julian became a phantom in his own home, his presence fleeting, his explanations for his absences becoming more elaborate. The Singapore deal became his all-encompassing alibi, a convenient black hole that absorbed his time, his attention, and his integrity. The time difference is brutal. He'd sigh, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair as he scrolled through emails at the breakfast table. I was on a conference call until 4 a.m. Eleanor, armed with an Ivy League education in art history and a lifetime of observing the subtle tells of the upper class, began to collect data. She was not a fool, and she would not be made into one. She noticed the second phone, a sleek burner-style smartphone he kept in his briefcase and claimed was for international clients to avoid roaming charges. A flimsy excuse for a man who owned a private jet. One afternoon, a credit card statement arrived, not the joint account, but his personal black card. It was usually handled by his assistant, but this one had been mailed to the house by mistake. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she slit open the envelope. She told herself she was just being organized, but she was looking for something, and she found it. Amidst the charges for 5-star restaurants and Savile Row suits were entries that made no sense. A dinner for 2 at Perse on a night he was supposedly working through dinner at the office. A charge from a lingerie boutique on Madison Avenue, a shop Eleanor had never stepped foot in. And then the one that made her blood run cold, a recurring charge for a luxury serviced apartment in Tribeca. Not a hotel, an apartment. A nest. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was no longer an abstract fear. It was a set of coordinates, a paper trail leading to a life he was living without her. The name Chloe Sterling surfaced in her mind, dredged up from a fleeting memory of Julian mentioning a brilliant new analyst. That evening she decided to follow him. It felt cheap, pathetic something out of a daytime soap opera, but she had to know. After he kissed her goodbye, murmuring about a late-night session with the lawyers, she waited 10 minutes and then hailed a cab, her swollen belly, a painful reminder of everything that was at stake. She directed the driver to the Tribeca address. Her hands clenched so tightly in her lap, her knuckles were white. The building was a sleek, anonymous tower of glass and steel. She didn't have to wait long. Julian's black town car pulled up to the curb. He got out, but he wasn't alone. A young woman emerged from the passenger side, laughing at something he'd said. She was beautiful in a sharp, hungry way, with a cascade of dark hair and a body that was all sharp angles and lean lines. She looped her arm through his, her head resting on his shoulder with an intimacy that felt like a physical blow to Eleanor. It was Chloe Sterling. Eleanor watched from the shadows of her taxi as they disappeared into the building, their silhouettes merging into one. The doorman greeted them with a familiar nod. This was their routine. This was their home. She didn't cry. The pain was too sharp, too deep for tears. It was a cold, hard certainty that settled in her bones. The life she had so carefully constructed was a lie. The man she loved, the father of her child, was a stranger. Driving back to their empty penthouse, the city lights blurred into meaningless streaks of color. She walked into the nursery, the soft blues and grays now feeling cold and mocking. The name Thomas Maxwell stuck in her throat. It was a name for a family, for a unit built on love and trust. What was it now? A brand name for a broken enterprise. The next day, Julian returned in the early morning, feigning exhaustion from his all-night negotiation. Eleanor was waiting for him in the living room, the credit card statement laid out on the marble coffee table like a verdict. "I think you and I need to have a talk about the Singapore deal," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "And I want you to tell me about your brilliant new analyst, Chloe Sterling." The color drained from Julian's face. The charming facade crumbled, revealing the panicked guilty man beneath. The architect of a billion-dollar empire had just seen his own foundation turn to dust. The confrontation was not the screaming match Eleanor had envisioned. There was no throwing of priceless vases, no torrent of tears. Her fury was a glacier, immense, silent and moving with unstoppable force. She sat on the cream-colored sofa, a portrait of unnerving stillness, and simply waited for him to speak. Julian, for the first time in his life, was stripped of his power. His usual tools, charm, intimidation, money, were useless against her cold, quiet judgment. He stumbled through the confession, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "It was a mistake, Elle. A stupid, meaningless mistake. It didn't mean anything. I was under so much pressure. I felt—" He trailed off, unable to articulate his own weakness. Eleanor listened without interruption, her gaze unwavering. She let his excuses hang in the air until they disintegrated under their own pathetic weight. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up dry cleaning, Julian," she said, finally her voice cutting through his stammering. "A 6-month affair with a subordinate in a secret apartment is a campaign of deceit. It is a choice you made every single day." He collapsed onto the ottoman before her, his head in his hands. He looked broken, a fallen king in his own castle. "I'll end it," he pleaded, his voice thick with a desperation she knew was genuine. The threat of losing her, of losing the perfect life he'd worked so hard to acquire, was real to him now. "Today, it's over. I'll fire her. I'll do whatever it takes. Please, Eleanor, don't leave me. Not now. Not with the baby coming." The baby. Thomas. He was the anchor in this storm, the only reason she was even sitting here. The thought of bringing her son into a shattered home of his first days, being defined by divorce lawyers and custody battles, was unbearable. She had a responsibility to her child that superseded her own agony. She looked at Julian, truly looked at him, and saw not a monster, but a deeply flawed man. A man whose ambition had become a cancer, metastasizing into his personal life. Perhaps this was the shock his system needed. Perhaps the fear of losing everything would be enough to make him the man she thought she had married. It was a gamble, but for Thomas, she was willing to take it. "You will end it," she stated, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. You will sever all contact. She will be gone from your company by the end of the day. You will sell the apartment in Tribeca, and you will give me complete, unrestricted access to all your phones, emails, and accounts. There will be no more secrets, Julian. Not one." He looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and shame. "Yes, of course. Anything. And you will go to therapy," she added. "With me. We will deal with this. But I am not forgiving you, Julian. Not yet. You will earn back my trust. It will be the hardest deal you have ever closed." So began the period of reconstruction. Julian, true to his word, moved with ruthless efficiency. Chloe Sterling was fired a generous severance package and a non-disclosure agreement, her parting gifts. The Tribeca love nest was put on the market. Julian surrendered his second phone and passwords, submitting to Eleanor's new regime of transparency with the humility of a penitent. Life settled into a new, fragile rhythm. They attended therapy sessions, where Julian spoke haltingly of his fears of inadequacy, of his constant need to conquer a trait that had made him a billionaire but a poor husband. Eleanor listened her heart, a walled-off fortress letting in only what was necessary for the rebuilding process. She focused on the baby. She finalized the nursery decor, she attended her Lamaze classes, she read books on motherhood. She was building a new life, a life centered on her son, and Julian was for now a provisional part of it. But she wasn't naive. She knew that cutting out a tumor didn't guarantee the cancer wouldn't return. While Julian seemed sincere, she could not shake the feeling that this was only an intermission, not the end of the play. What she didn't know was that she was absolutely right, because in firing Chloe Sterling, Julian had not excised a problem. He had created a rogue agent. Chloe was not the type of woman to be discarded and paid off. She had invested 6 months of her life in the Julian Croft project, and she would not see her investment yield nothing. As she packed up her desk at Croft Capital, a cold, vengeful fury burned within her. She had lost the battle, but she was already planning how to win the war. And she held an ace up her sleeve, a piece of information that would soon become a weapon of mass destruction. She too was pregnant. Or at least that's what she would make Julian believe. Chloe Sterling did not go quietly into the night. She went to a 5-star hotel paid for with Julian's generous severance and plotted. She was a strategist, and she knew that a direct assault on Eleanor was futile. Eleanor had the home, the ring, the societal standing. So Chloe would attack from a different angle. She would target the one thing they were meant to share, the legacy. A few weeks after her dismissal, she made her move. She called Julian on his private line, a number she had memorized. He answered, his voice tense. "Chloe, how did you get this number I told you not to contact me?" "Don't worry, Julian," she said, her voice a silky blend of vulnerability and steel. "I'm not calling to cause trouble. I signed your little NDA. I'm just calling to tell you something you have a right to know." She paused for dramatic effect. "I'm pregnant, and it's yours." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. Julian felt the floor drop out from beneath him. Another baby. A secret baby. It was a catastrophe, a complication that could unravel the fragile peace he had brokered with Eleanor. "That's not possible," he stammered. "We were careful." "Careful isn't perfect, Julian. You know that. Better than anyone," she cooed. "I'm 12 weeks along. I just found out. I don't want anything from you. I just thought you should know." It was a lie, of course. She wasn't pregnant. But she knew how to create the illusion of truth. A faked sonogram from a shady online service, a few well-placed comments about morning sickness, it was all part of the trap. Her real plan was far more insidious. She was already in the early stages of a private adoption, seeking out a newborn she could pass off as her own. She was manufacturing a reality, and Julian was her first and most important believer. He was horrified. He begged her to keep it quiet, offered her money, anything to make the problem go away. And Chloe, playing the part of the reluctant, heartbroken victim, agreed. "I don't want your money, Julian," she said, her voice laced with false nobility. "This is my baby. I'll raise it myself. I won't be a problem for you and your perfect wife." This, of course, only made Julian feel more guilty and, crucially, more indebted to her. He started sending her money for the baby's expenses, he told himself. He began taking her calls, listening as she spoke about her pregnancy, her hopes and fears. He was being drawn back into her web, not through Sashan this time, but through a misguided sense of responsibility. He was trying to manage a crisis, but he was only feeding the monster. He kept all of this a secret from Eleanor. Their therapy-mandated transparency had its limits, and this secret was too radioactive to disclose. He was living a double life again, not of infidelity, but of deception. Chloe's masterstroke came during one of these clandestine calls. She spoke to Julian in a soft, wistful voice about choosing a name for her baby. A son, she now claimed to know it was. "It's so hard to do this alone," she sighed. "You and Eleanor. You probably have the perfect name picked out already. Something strong and classic, I bet." Julian, caught off guard and softened by guilt, made his fatal error. "We do," he said quietly. "We're going to call him Thomas Maxwell, after her grandfather and my father." The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. He had shared something sacred, something that belonged to him and Eleanor, with this woman. But it was too late. On the other end of the line, Chloe smiled. It was a cold, triumphant smile. She had it. The key. The one thing that would bind her to Julian forever. The one thing that would wound Eleanor in a way no affair ever could. She now knew the name of their most precious asset. Her plan crystallized. Through her adoption channels, she found an expectant mother due to give birth a few weeks before Eleanor's due date. It was a boy. The timing was perfect. She would steal their son's name. She would register her adopted child as Thomas Maxwell Sterling. By the time Eleanor and Julian's son was born, his intended name would already belong to the son of the mistress. It was a power play of breathtaking cruelty. A way to ensure that every time Julian looked at his legitimate son, he would be reminded of his illegitimate one. She wouldn't just be a footnote in his history. She would be a co-author of its next chapter. She was not just stealing a name. She was stealing a legacy. The final weeks of Eleanor's pregnancy were on the surface idyllic. Julian was a changed man. He was attentive, doting, and present in a way he hadn't been for over a year. He massaged her swollen feet. He personally oversaw the final touches on the nursery, and he spoke to her belly, promising his son the world. Eleanor, wanting to believe in this second chance, allowed herself to hope. The glacier of her fury had begun to thaw just a little. She mistook his overcompensation, born of a new and terrible secret, for genuine redemption. Meanwhile, in a private hospital across town, Chloe Sterling's plan was coming to fruition. The adoption was finalized. She held the newborn boy in her arms, a child with no knowledge of the twisted role he was about to play. He was a prop in her revenge fantasy. She filled out the birth registration forms with a steady hand, her handwriting a confident, elegant script. First name, Thomas, middle name, Maxwell. Last name, Sterling. She looked down at the document, a wave of dark satisfaction washing over her. It was done. She had staked her flag. She had created a fact, an unerasable entry in the public record. She sent a photo of the birth certificate to Julian with a simple message, "Meet your son. Thomas Maxwell Sterling. Born today." Julian saw the message while he was in a board meeting. He felt the blood drain from his face. He excused himself, stumbling into his private bathroom, and stared at the image on his phone, his breath catching in his throat. She had actually done it. She had taken their name. The name meant to honor his dead father and her beloved grandfather. It was a desecration. Panic, cold and absolute, seized him. His first instinct was to tell Eleanor to confess everything and face the consequences, but he couldn't. He imagined her face, the hope in her eyes, replaced by that look of cold, shattered disappointment. He pictured the walls of their carefully reconstructed life crumbling to dust. He couldn't bear it. He had come so far in winning back her trust. This would destroy it all. So he made another choice. The coward's choice. He decided to say nothing. He called Chloe, his voice a furious whisper. "What have you done? You can't do this, Chloe. You have to change it." "Why?" she replied, her voice cool and composed. "I love the name. It felt right. Strong. It's just a name. Julian. Surely there are other names in the world." "It's not just a name. It's our name," he hissed. "It's my son's name now," she corrected him. "And he is your son too. Don't forget that." He was trapped. She knew it. He couldn't expose her lie about the baby's paternity without revealing his own affair and subsequent deception. He couldn't force her to change the name without a legal battle that would make everything public. He was completely and utterly outmaneuvered. "Don't tell her, Julian," Chloe warned, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It would break her heart. Just pick a new name. It's for the best. This will be our secret." He hung up his mind, reeling. Pick a new name. The simplicity of her suggestion was insulting. How could he go to Eleanor now, a week before her due date, and tell her they had to abandon the name they had cherished for months? What reason could he possibly give? His silence was the only option, a ticking time bomb he prayed would never detonate. A week later, Eleanor went into labor. It was a long and difficult birth, but at dawn on a crisp November morning, their son arrived. He was perfect, with a fuzz of dark hair, like Julian's and Eleanor's calm, observant eyes. As they laid him in her arms, all the pain and fear of the past year melted away, replaced by a wave of love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, Thomas," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Hello, Thomas Maxwell Vance." Julian stood beside her, his face a complicated mask of joy and terror. He looked at his son, his beautiful, legitimate son, and all he could see was the ghost of the other, Thomas the stolen one. The secret was a physical weight pressing down on him, suffocating him. The next day, the hospital registrar came to their private suite with the official paperwork for the birth certificate. It was a cheerful, bureaucratic woman who had no idea she was about to detonate a bomb. "All right, folks, let's get this little man official," she said, pen poised. "Name of the father, Julian Croft. Name of the mother, Eleanor Vance. And the name of the baby, Thomas Maxwell Vance," Eleanor said, beaming with pride. The registrar typed the name into her tablet. Her brow furrowed slightly. She typed it again. "That's funny," she murmured. "We're getting a flag in the system. Hold on a moment." "A flag?" Eleanor asked, her smile faltering. "What kind of flag?" "Sometimes it happens with common names," the woman said, still typing. "But this is specific. The system is linking the name Thomas Maxwell to the father's details, Julian Croft, and flagging it as a potential duplicate registration within the last 30 days. Did you recently register another child, Mr. Croft?" Time stopped. The air in the room grew thick and heavy. Eleanor turned her head slowly, her eyes locking onto Julian's. His face was ashen, his expression one of pure, unadulterated horror. He couldn't speak. He could only stand there as his world and hers finally and irrevocably came crashing down. "Julian," Eleanor's voice was a whisper, but it carried the force of a landslide. "What is she talking about?" The hospital room, once a sanctuary of new life, became a courtroom. The registrar, sensing the sudden glacial tension, quickly gathered her things. I'll come back later," she stammered, backing out of the room and closing the door, leaving them to the deafening silence. Eleanor's gaze never left Julian's face. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence was an indictment. In her arms, the baby, their son, began to stir, blissfully unaware that his very identity was at the center of a war. "Julian," she said again, her voice dangerously calm. "Tell me what she was talking about. Now." And so the whole sordid story came tumbling out. Not just the affair which she already knew about, but the second act of the tragedy. The lie about Chloe's pregnancy, the secret phone calls, the money, and finally, the ultimate betrayal, Chloe's deliberate theft of their son's name. He confessed that he had known about it for a week, that he had stood by her side during labor, letting her whisper the stolen name to their child, all while knowing it had been poisoned. Eleanor listened without a single tear. Her grief was too profound for that. It was a hollow, echoing chasm that had opened up inside her. The man she had tried to forgive, the man she had gambled on for the sake of her son, was weaker and more deceitful than she could have ever imagined. He hadn't just been unfaithful, he had been a coward. He had protected his own comfort at the expense of her heart and their son's legacy. When he finished, the only sound was the soft breathing of the baby. "Get out," she said. "Eleanor, please. Get out." Her voice was no longer a whisper. It was forged from steel. "Get out of this room. Get out of my sight. Send my lawyer a text. Tell him to meet me here in 1 hour. We will be discussing the terms of our divorce." Julian, finally understanding the totality of his ruin, turned and walked out. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Eleanor was alone with her son. She looked down at his perfect, innocent face. He was not Thomas Maxwell. That name was tainted, sullied, a monument to betrayal. He deserved a name that was clean, strong, and entirely his own. A name that represented his mother's resilience, not his father's weakness. The grief, when it finally came, was not a flood, but a single hot tear that traced a path down her cheek and fell onto the baby's blanket. In that moment, something shifted within her. The pain began to cool, to harden, crystallizing into a diamond of pure, unadulterated rage. A simple divorce was not enough. Money was not enough. Julian's humiliation was a start, but it was not the goal. The true villain here was Chloe Sterling, the woman who had used a child, an adopted child, no less, as a weapon. A woman who had perverted the sacred act of naming a baby into an act of psychological warfare. She could not be allowed to get away with it. Eleanor's mind, always sharp and strategic, began to work. She needed to expose Chloe, but not in a messy private drama that could be spun and manipulated by PR teams. She needed a stage, a big one. She needed to control the narrative so completely that there would be no ambiguity, no room for doubt. An idea began to form, audacious and terrifying in its scope. A week from now, Julian was scheduled for the biggest media appearance of his career. He was to be the keynote guest on The Croft Report, a primetime special on CNBC, hosted by the legendary financial journalist Nolan Vance, no relation, a bitter irony, celebrating Julian's deal of the decade, the very Singapore acquisition he had used as a cover for his affair. It was meant to be his coronation, the moment he ascended from a mere millionaire to a global icon. Millions would be watching. The entire business world would be tuned in. It would not be his coronation. It would be his execution. And Eleanor would be the one to wield the sword. She picked up her phone, her fingers moving with newfound purpose. Her first call was not to her lawyer, but to her best friend, Sarah, a top-tier publicist. "Sarah," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I need your help. I'm about to do something crazy, and I need to make sure the whole world is watching." She looked down at her son again, her vow silent but absolute. "They tried to erase you, my love. They tried to make you a sequel to their sordid story. But I will make you the start of a new one. Your story. And it will begin with your mother, taking back everything they tried to steal." She would give him a new name later, a better one. But first she had to burn the old world down. The week leading up to the interview was a blur of calculated maneuvers. While the world believed Eleanor Vance was a heartbroken new mother, secluded in her penthouse, she was in fact a general commanding a covert operation. Her first move was to play the part of the reconciled wife, but with a chilling twist. She allowed Julian back into the apartment, but not into her bed or her heart. He was a ghost in their home, desperate to placate her, and she used his guilt like a scalpel. Nolan Vance's producer called. She told him one evening, her voice coolly neutral as she rocked the baby, whom she now simply called my son. "They want to do a short, pre-taped segment with me, the supportive wife behind the great man. I told them I wasn't up to it." Panic flickered in Julian's eyes. Her absence from the broadcast would raise questions. "Elle, you have to. It'll look strange if you don't. Please. It's the most important night of my career." "Is it?" she asked, her eyebrow arched. "More important than the day your son was born?" She let the question hang in the air before relenting. "Fine. For the sake of appearances, I will do it. But on one condition. I don't want to be pre-taped. I want to be there. Live." Julian, desperate for any semblance of normalcy, readily agreed. "Of course. Anything. It will be perfect. Us together. A family." He was a fool, seeing only what he wanted to see. He didn't realize he was helping her load the gun he would soon be staring down the barrel of. Next, Eleanor, with her publicist Sarah's help, began gathering her ammunition. They hired a discreet private investigator who, in less than 48 hours, delivered a comprehensive dossier on Chloe Sterling. The key finding was explosive confirmation through hospital sources and adoption agency leaks that Chloe's baby was not biologically hers. She had not given birth. She had orchestrated an adoption. The lie she had told Julian about her pregnancy was a calculated fraud from the very beginning. Eleanor now held the ultimate weapon. Chloe hadn't just acted out of spite. She had committed deliberate, malicious fraud to ensnare Julian and terrorize his wife. The final piece of the puzzle was the stage itself. Sarah, using her extensive network, reached out to a junior producer on Nolan Vance's show, a young woman she had mentored years ago. She didn't reveal the whole plan, just enough to pique her interest. "Eleanor Vance has a story to tell," Sarah said cryptically over coffee. "A story that will be the biggest scoop of your career. It involves Julian Croft, but it's much bigger than a business deal. She wants to tell it live on your show. All you have to do is make sure the cameras are on her when she decides to speak." The producer, sensing a career-making moment, agreed. A secret signal was arranged. When Eleanor touched her pearl necklace, the director would switch to a tight shot on her and ensure her microphone was live. On the day of the broadcast, Eleanor transformed herself. She chose a dress in a striking sapphire blue, a color of royalty and power. Her hair was styled in elegant waves, her makeup flawless. She was not a victim. She was a Valkyrie. In her purse, she carried 2 documents, a copy of Chloe's adopted son's birth certificate and the PI's report confirming the fraud. Julian, seeing her, was breathless with relief. "You look stunning, Elle," he said, trying to take her hand. She allowed it her touch, as cold as marble. As they rode in the town car to the television studio, he practiced his talking points about market disruption and fiscal strategy. Eleanor remained silent. Her mind focused, her heart beating a steady rhythmic drum of anticipation. She was about to walk into the lion's den, but she was the one with the teeth. In her Upper West Side apartment, Chloe Sterling poured herself a glass of champagne. She was watching the pre-show commentary on CNBC, her adopted son, sleeping in his crib. Tonight, Julian would be celebrated, and she knew that every time he thought of his success, he would be thinking of his 2 sons, named Thomas, the legitimate, and the secret. It was her victory, a permanent mark she had left on his life. She settled onto her sofa, ready to watch the show, completely unaware that she was not an observer, but the star of the coming execution. The whole world was about to learn her name. The CNBC studio buzzed with a controlled, high-stakes energy. Nolan Vance, a silver-haired journalist with a reputation for incisive questions, greeted Julian with a warm, firm handshake. "Julian, good to have you. And Eleanor, you look radiant. It's wonderful to have you here supporting him. He's the man of the hour." Eleanor replied, her smile a perfect, polished mask. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." They were led to the set 2 plush armchairs, facing Nolan's desk, with the iconic, glowing backdrop of the stock market behind them. Eleanor was seated slightly behind, and to the side of Julian, the classic position of the adoring, silent partner. The floor director began the countdown. 10 seconds to air. 5, 4, 3. The cameras went live. Nolan Vance opened with a glowing tribute to Julian's genius, detailing the complex multi-billion-dollar Singapore deal. Julian, in his element, leaned forward, speaking with his usual confidence about synergy leverage and shareholder value. He was magnetic, the very picture of a modern captain of industry. Eleanor watched him, her expression one of quiet pride. She let the first segment play out, allowing the narrative of Julian Croft, the brilliant visionary, to build to its crescendo. The producer in the control room was getting nervous, wondering if she had been played. Then Nolan turned his attention to her. "Eleanor, people see this incredible success, but they don't see the sacrifice. Julian has been working around the clock on this. It must have been difficult, especially with a new baby on the way." This was her moment. "It's been a challenging time." Eleanor began, her voice smooth as silk. Julian smiled, expecting a platitude. But Julian and I have always believed in the importance of legacy, of building something that lasts. That's why the birth of our son was so momentous for us." She paused, her fingers moving to the string of pearls at her neck. She touched the center pearl. In the control booth, the junior producer yelled, "Now camera 2 on her, and bring up her mic." The camera zoomed in, pushing Julian to the edge of the frame. The shot was now an intimate close-up of Eleanor. She looked directly into the lens as if speaking to each of the millions of viewers personally. "We chose a name for him that was deeply meaningful," she continued, her voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "Thomas Maxwell, for our fathers, a name to honor family integrity and trust." Julian's smile froze on his face. He shifted uncomfortably. Nolan Vance looked intrigued. "But what my husband has failed to mention in his story of success," Eleanor went on, her eyes like chips of ice, "is that his work on the Singapore deal involved more than just late nights at the office. It involved a junior analyst named Chloe Sterling, and it involved a secret apartment in Tribeca." A collective gasp went through the studio. In the control room, the lead producer was screaming, "What is happening? Stay on her!" Nolan Vance's jaw was slack with shock. Julian looked as if he had been turned to stone. "You see," Eleanor said, her voice dropping slightly, creating an effect of chilling intimacy, "my husband's affair was a betrayal I was willing for the sake of my child to try and move past. But some actions are unforgivable." She reached into her purse and pulled out the copy of the birth certificate, holding it up for the camera to see. "This is the birth certificate for a boy named Thomas Maxwell Sterling. He was registered 3 weeks ago by Chloe Sterling. My husband's mistress took the name we chose for our son and gave it to hers in a calculated, cruel attempt to secure her place in his life." The studio was in an uproar. Nolan Vance, recovering, leaned into his microphone. "Mrs. Croft, are you saying—" "I'm saying my husband, a man celebrated tonight for his vision, stood by and allowed this to happen," Eleanor said, her gaze shifting to Julian, who was now visibly sweating under the hot studio lights. "He kept it a secret from me. I only found out when I went to register my own son, and the hospital computer flagged his name as a duplicate. Imagine that. Your child's identity stolen before he even has a chance to own it." She wasn't finished. She pulled out the second document. "And for anyone who thinks Miss Sterling is just another heartbroken woman, let me be clear. Our investigator has confirmed that her child is adopted. Her entire pregnancy was a fraud, a lie she told to manipulate my husband and terrorize me. She used an innocent child as a pawn in her sick game." She placed the documents on the table. "So yes, Nolan Julian has achieved a great deal. He has successfully brokered a deal built on lies. He has successfully fathered a son whose name he allowed to be stolen. And he has successfully destroyed his family in front of millions of people." She stood up, a figure of immense and terrible dignity. "I will be filing for divorce tomorrow morning, and I will be giving my son a new name, a name that stands for strength and truth, something his father and his father's mistress clearly know nothing about." With that, she turned and walked off the set. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel the heat of the fire she had just started ablaze that would consume Julian Croft's reputation, Chloe Sterling's future, and the entire architecture of their false lives. The cameras stayed on Julian's face, pale and frozen in a rictus of utter humiliation, broadcasting his ruin in high definition to a stunned and captivated world. The king had been dethroned on his coronation day. The seconds after Eleanor walked off set, were pure chaos. The live broadcast abruptly cut to a commercial, but the damage was done. The internet exploded. Eleanor Vance Croft report and Chloe the fraud became the top 3 trending topics worldwide within minutes. Eleanor's calm surgical takedown was clipped, memed, and analyzed on every platform, transforming her overnight from a society wife into a cultural icon of righteous fury. She was hailed as a queen, a warrior, a phoenix rising. For Julian, the aftermath was a free fall into personal and professional hell. His phone lit up with frantic calls from board members, investors, and his PR team. But he couldn't answer. He sat paralyzed in his armchair under the hot studio lights, the ghost of his career evaporating before his eyes. The deal of the decade became the scandal of the century. The investors, repulsed by the public display of his profound moral failings, pulled their support. Croft Capital's stock went into a nosedive from which it would never recover. The board, in a desperate act of damage control, demanded his resignation. The empire he had built with relentless ambition was dismantled in less than a week by a truth he had been too cowardly to tell. He lost his company, his reputation, and his family in a single televised implosion. He became a cautionary tale, a symbol of how quickly a titan could fall. Chloe Sterling's fate was equally swift and brutal. She had watched the broadcast from her apartment, the champagne glass slipping from her hand and shattering on the floor as Eleanor delivered the killing blow. Her carefully constructed revenge had backfired spectacularly. She was not the secret winner. She was the villain in a global drama. Hounded by paparazzi and reviled by an online mob that dissected her every move, her life became an inescapable prison. The details of the adoption fraud led to a formal investigation. She lost the high-paying consulting job she'd secured and found herself unemployable. Her name, toxic. She had wanted to steal a legacy but ended up destroying her own future, vanishing into a bitter obscurity, haunted by the infamy she had so carefully engineered. Eleanor, however, did not revel in their destruction. Her focus was singular, her son. True to her word, her lawyer filed for divorce the next morning. The legal battle was short and decisive. Armed with the mountain of evidence and overwhelming public support, Eleanor's team secured a settlement that was not just financially massive, but strategically brilliant. She took control of a significant portion of the liquid assets, ensuring her and her son's independence forever. It was never about the money itself, but what it represented: freedom, security, and the power to build a life on her own terms. She sold the cold, cavernous penthouse with its painful memories and bought a magnificent, sun-drenched brownstone in Brooklyn's Park Slope. It was a home with character and history, with a sprawling garden that felt like a secret world in the heart of the city. Here, away from the prying eyes of Manhattan society, she began to heal. A few weeks after the dust settled, she hosted a small, intensely private ceremony in her new garden. Her closest friends gathered under the shade of an old maple tree. There was no priest or officiant, only Eleanor holding her son, who was wrapped in a simple white blanket. "A name is the first gift we give a child," she began, her voice steady and clear, carrying across the quiet garden. "It is a promise, a story, a destiny. The name we first chose for him was a story of two families, a bridge between two worlds. But that bridge has burned. The story has changed." She looked down at her son, his eyes open and watching her with serene curiosity. He will not carry the weight of his father's mistakes. He will not be a reminder of betrayal. His story will not begin with ashes. It will begin from the ashes. She took a deep breath, her smile radiant and genuine. I name you Phoenix Arthur Vance. Phoenix for the mythical bird that is reborn from fire, stronger and more beautiful than before. And Arthur for my grandfather, a man of unwavering integrity and quiet strength, whose legacy is one of love and honor. Your name is a promise, my love, she whispered, kissing his forehead. A promise of resilience, of truth, and of a life that will be entirely, magnificently your own. Phoenix. It was more than a name. It was a declaration, a testament to his mother's spirit, to her ability to turn the deepest wounds into sources of incredible strength. In that garden, surrounded by love, Eleanor Vance hadn't just given her son a new name. She had forged him a new destiny, one built not on a broken dynasty, but on the unbreakable foundation of a mother's love and the triumphant power of rebirth. In the end, Eleanor Vance didn't just expose a mistress. She dismantled an empire built on deceit and reclaimed her own power. She proved that a stolen name could be replaced by a stronger one, and that out of the ashes of betrayal, a new life can rise. Her story became a viral sensation, a testament to the fact that hell hath no fury, like a mother protecting her child's legacy. What would you have done in Eleanor's shoes? Would you have walked away quietly, or would you have sought your own public justice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a powerful reminder of the drama that can unfold behind closed doors. If you love stories of justice and revenge, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life dramas.